Let's get it.
Greeting you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. I'm honored to have my dear brother Rawa on episode 15 of the Moonas Magica podcast. This brother that you're seeing right here is very, when I use the word dear, I mean that I actually, out of a lot of the brothers in the community that I'm inspired by, Rawa is one of them. And that's why I've asked Rawa to come onto this podcast. Um, and he's got a tensor ring on his neck, which I gifted him. And we're, beyond the technology, beyond the free energy, um, Moona's Magica is about unity consciousness and connecting all of the community that are stewarding the heart space and bringing these new earth frequencies onto this earth and transmuting the illusion of separation. And brother Rawa is one of these brothers that is really living it. And yeah, I'm just really honored and excited to have him on. Um, we're going to start off with a little bit of an invocation and some breaths together, and then I'll invite Rawa to begin to hold the space for him, and I want him to share his story of who he is and where he's at and the mission here. So let's drop in for a moment, and if you're on the other side of the screen as well, I ask you to settle in, drop your shoulders, and relax into this presence. Relax into peace. Relax into harmony. And I ask all of us, to the best of our ability, to surrender our personal will up into the heavens. So we'll take a few deep breaths here together, breathing in the lower belly. Nice sip of air. Hold it and release. Again, breathing in through the nose, into the lower belly, up. And let go and sink in and merge into this silent space. Another breath. Lower belly, up, into the crown. Bring your awareness, your attention, your energy to your crown. And give thanks for this life. Give thanks for this moment that we're sharing together. Knowing that this now is this eternal flame of consciousness. And dropping into the heart space, bringing our awareness into our heart now. Invoking the emotion, the feeling of gratitude and appreciation and the joy for life. And no matter what circumstances are going on in your life right now, there's always going to be something that tries to take us out of this peace, of this presence. But I ask you to hold firm, be strong, and claim who you are, and stay strong in the heart. So thank you for tuning in to this podcast. Once again, honored to have Brother Rawa here, and I'm gonna give him the awareness right here. So let's get into it. Brother Rawa. So,
Hmm.
uh, how did, if you want to maybe share a little bit of where you're at now and what your mission is, you have a hat that says Bold and Centered, and maybe share with the community, the Earth, the YouTube community about what Bold and Center is, Bold and Centered is, and also who you are and where you come from. I really just want to give you the stage here. So maybe if you could start back from however you feel with your kind of childhood and growing up in a society like we did, and how that shaped you and molded you, and then coming into your awakening. So yeah, go ahead. Whatever you feel to share.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for that welcoming, brother. And before flowing into the depth of my story and sharing a bit more, I just want to really take a moment to honor you, brother, and for really stewarding this channel for the mission that you're on of raising consciousness and bringing back that unity consciousness and or not bringing back, remembering that that's what we are, right? We are part of the one. And yeah, I just feel really honored to be seen by a brother who I have such reverence for. So I love you, brother. I want to thank you for the bottom of my heart. That was a beautiful invocation. You couldn't have done it better. I couldn't have done it any better. So I just want to honor, the forces of nature that brought us together, our ancestors, and those guides that walk with us, the unseen and the spirit realms. So I always like to, pay respects to the forces that are much more than the simple 3D eye can acknowledge. So thank you for that. And yeah, just start off with, I am. Claiming who I am in this world has been something that I've been repatterning after fracturing Humpty back together again. So who am I? I am God. I'm a child of God. I'm one with God, and I'm devotee to Christ consciousness. I'm a man who loves deeply. I'm a man who's devoted to his path of awakening hearts and men to reunite with their goddess warrior sisters. And I'm a man who stewards his earth with love, with impeccability, with compassion. And I'm a man who's honored to be here right now. So start off with that declaration, that decree, and
Sure.
yeah, thank you, brother. It's where to start. Well, I'll start with my mission, and I can backtrack to, the inspiration and how I became devoted to this mission of awakening hearts and men. It's really a reflection of my own personal life's journey of putting Humpty back together again. I grew up in the Western culture, Western world, born and raised in Toronto, and found a deep sense of emptiness in my adulthood and in my younger days. And it put me on a mission of reclaiming parts of myself that I had fractured, that had left my soul or spirit or had distanced myself from myself. Um, so as I started to put Humpty back together again, I recognized I wasn't alone in this. And I've always had a niche for attracting people. I've always had an ability to be a leader, not necessarily always for the most conscious reasons. But the more that I started to heal, and the more I recognized this was a collective pattern that a lot of men felt disconnected from their heart space. So the journey is a long one, not a long one. I can expedite it and share a bit more about why and how I became devoted to supporting the awakening in hearts and men, to remember wholeness within, and to stand bold and heart-centered and recognizing we're spiritual warriors and guardians to all that is sacred. That's the tagline. That's the elevator pitch there, right? And it's a really devotion to creating accessibility to men's circles on a global scale and to unify the brotherhood movement and break down separation and divide and just say, hey guys, it's time to rise together. What we're moving through as a collective, I think it needs us working in collaboration deeply, If we're still in competition, chasing peanuts and little nibbles um, to compete over things, we're gonna have a challenging time bringing this new earth into reality. So that's the call to action to create unity amongst the brotherhood movement. And to back things up, I had a beautiful upbringing. Raised in Toronto, middle class family, hardworking father, hardworking family, really, and who did the best to nourish me and provide for me, and all my basic needs were always taken care of. And I was always a social butterfly. I loved my friends. That was something I put a lot of emphasis on since I was a child. I'm a Leo and a very, high energy generator. And school couldn't captivate my attention. Like I didn't care for it at all. It was just a chore to go there. It was all for socializing. That was the only thing that captivated my attention at school. And as I grew older, I there were some shadow pieces. There were some pieces left out like anybody's childhood. My family was wonderful and loving in their own right, but there was certain limitations that they didn't provide for me. Emotional intelligence, I feel, probably the strongest one, and that's just a reflection of their upbringing and some of the challenges that they faced. And I grew to have a deep fear of my father. I really had a lot of father wounds. I recognized later on in life. Um, I didn't feel that I could make mistakes. I didn't feel like, I could express my anger or upset or hurt. And my memories, the ones that are, still transforming. There's a lot of I feel like once we do the healing work, some of the wounding memories gets healed, but there is a lot of recognition that behavioral punishment was the standard. And I don't think that's just with my father, my family. Like we talk about church and religion, be God-fearing or else you'll be punished. School for a guy who would have had all the labels of ADHD, OCD, whatever titles you want to put on things. I'm sure I would have had them all if that was a thing back when I was in public school. I'm 44 years old. So then it wasn't so much about shoving pills down used throats. So I was grateful that um, came through the generation that I did. But when you're somebody who my attention span couldn't be held in class. So there's always a lot of different areas to be punished. And looking upon later on in my life doing some deep healing work, I recognize that there is a level of sensitivity that I probably classify as a highly sensitive man. And what are the impacts of the behavioral punishment? And what were the impacts of having, yeah, pretty deep fear of my father, growing up when I was younger, I went to and having deep love for my friendships and not feeling as safe at home, I really valued my relationships with my friends, perhaps in an unbalanced way where I did as little as I could humanly possible to go home. I was always at a friend's place for dinner after school playing. High school, I'd sleep over at friends' places on weekends. And I did what I could to fit in or to try to be popular, right? So that snowballed into, drinking and partying at a young age. And I remember the first time I got drunk when I was like, I think it was 11 or 12, grade six, at a New Year's party. And I came back home and I fell off the top bunk. And the next morning, I fell off the top bunk because I was so drunk.
Mm.
And the next morning, I was called down to the dinner table, and my father was very stern and giving me this hard talk where it's like he was threatening to put me into AA if this continued. I'm fucking 11 years old, and it's just like,
Wow.
chill out. Like, maybe he foresaw something coming, but
True.
he didn't have the emotional intelligence to connect with me on a emotional level or like a supportive friendship or just like, talk to me like it was always he used, fear was his tactic of parenting in a certain way, right? And recognized later on in life why he was a certain way that he was, and not that he was a bad guy. He was just so wound up, stressed out, and didn't have his tools. He didn't develop tools to be emotionally intelligent. So anyhow, I got selling narcotics really young, roaming the streets. It started off innocently enough by, grabbing a half quarter of weed, which for those who aren't privy to the street lingo, that's 3.5 grams. And then I'd divide that up into 5 dimes, which would be five $10 packages. So I'd make, $5 and enough to smoke a bit of weed for free.
Mm.
And given my social skills and my friendships, this began to snowball and I began to expand and grow. And, you know, by the time high school was out, I had, I don't know, 5 pounds, 10 pounds in different lockers in high schools and just had duffel bags full of stuff. And I was a street. I was, for somebody who grew up in middle class and in a decent neighborhood in Toronto, I went to the streets pretty young and That was how I spent my life, playing in the parks, smoking weed, hustling, and this this feeling of like I didn't fit into society. I had no intention of going to college or university to maybe there was a little intention because that's what you're supposed to do at that age, right? Or else you're kind of a failure. I yeah, the thought of, putting on a career for the next 40 years of my life and then maybe retiring at the ripe age of 65 to then enjoy it just didn't appeal to me. And from the skills I was developing, I was making good money and I continued to flourish in that line of work. And then things snowballed a little bit more where I was introduced to cocaine.
Mm,
And it's like I missed this growth stage of like starting small and going big. Like I automatically, because of my already growing mini empire in the ganja business, next thing I knew, I had a pretty flourishing cocaine business.
mm,
And given my vices, I was a weekend warrior, right? They used to call me the last Viking because I could drink like a fish and, drive a car home after a 60 ouncer. And um, sure enough, started to get into cocaine a bit. I was very fortunate that that wasn't my vice of choice. Alcohol was what had me by the balls, really. And I spent my 20s and early 30s really numbing myself out. Where in my early 20s, I could be the life of the party and it was natural to me. Like I really had a magnetic personality and I love bringing people together and I love celebrating life. I started to get paranoid. I
mm,
started to mask a lot of my paranoia and, making up white lies about what I do. And always, I'm in the underworld, right? I'm hiding. I'm shaming myself. I'm staying in the darkness, right? That's what you do when you're in the underworld, right? You don't want to be seen in certain ways. So after hours, every weekend, just what was conditioned in me to be a man was who could fight, fuck, drink, and make the most money as possible. And I was a thoroughbred of all of them. And I did this until I couldn't repress any more of the emotional pain that I had been suffering inside. I had been masking so much guilt and shame and you know the quick dopamine hits of having another notch on the belt of a woman I slept with or making a couple stacks of couple $1,000 stacks just couldn't give me the illusion that I was doing something that was fulfilling in my life. So I woke up and I had after a weekend bender and just gutted and empty and I Googled shrink near me and
mm.
sure enough, 2 blocks away, I found a psychiatrist, and that was actually interesting enough. I believe it was the year 2012, which, from me getting understanding the prophecies a bit more, a shift into more the age of Aquarius, is that it? The feminine consciousness and this
Okay.
awakening. And and that was when I first started to take responsibility for my life. Until then, I was buck the fuck up and deal with it. Be a man. You're not, I had this like you're weak, who are you to go get help? And all of these narratives of what I felt being a man was stoic, strong, you don't need help. And finally I didn't have it in me anymore to resist. And I put the body armor down and I went to see a psychiatrist. And that was the first step where I felt like I just unloaded on this poor woman, just so much built up emotions that I had, just so many tears flowing, which was a great thing, as I had been pretty emotionally constipated up until then. And that's when I realized that I had a lot of daddy issues.
Mm,
I'd been sharing with her some of the challenges, and I really held a lot of resentment towards my father, blaming him for going to the streets at a young age. He was the reason why I couldn't express myself emotionally. He was the reason why I was stuck, all this blame. And I didn't want to harbor that anymore. And I remember one day, which was a big catalyst for my life, I decided that I was going to face my father. And just so happened my psychiatrist office was 2 blocks away, and I was walking home and I made this choice and I could feel I walked to the front steps and tears were welling up and this time I was dealing with a lot of anxiety. I was breathing deep. My sister could hear me all the way from the backyard. Pretty big house. She walks away to the front. She's like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, I gotta go talk to dad." I kind of kind of compose myself. And he was on the third floor of the house and in his office in his lair. And as I'm walking up, I hit the second floor and just this floodgate of tears just flows over me. I'm like, fuck it, I got to do this, And so I went to go face him, and just tears, 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 and I'm like, Dad, I got to talk to you, right? And first thing he says to me, he's like annoyed, right? He's like, Jeffrey, he's like, are you going to jail again? And I was like, no, man, like I just need you to be my father, like I'm stuck and I'm struggling and I don't know what to do, and can feel tears kind of coming up over me just saying that. I was so stuck at the time. And the craziest thing happened was like I told him I'd been struggling with depression, and I needed him to be my father, and yeah, he opened up and shared that he had been struggling with depression until he was in his 60s.
mm,
And nobody ever would have known if I hadn't. I would never have known. He was just, to me, just so unavailable and so stoic. And he broke down and shared that, yeah, he struggled until he was just in recent years has he developed some inner peace. And I got to understand some of his childhood traumas where he had shared that when he was a child, his parents would fucking fight incessantly and they'd have these riots. And at one point, his mother, who was upset with her father, yelled at him when he was like 5 or 6. She's like, if it wasn't for you, I'd be gone. So she put all that energy onto my father, blaming him for why she couldn't leave the relationship. And he absorbed all that and he took it on and he tried to be perfect. He walked on eggshells. He didn't want to incite a riot.
mm,
Nature and his dog were his best friend. And I see how he just repressed so much of his own personal expression. And then it all made sense on why he was on edge growing up. All this stress that he didn't know how to deal with and cope with. He was just emotionally constipated, constantly just more annoyance was his energy. Like, don't bother me.
mm,
He wouldn't be violent physically, but just like this deep sense of unsafety with like anything with him.
mm,
And so that was a big turning point where I made a choice. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be suffering until I'm 60 with depression. And that was like, one foot in front of the other. I was still in the narcotics business, still drinking, but in this transitionary stage of like being more real and authentic, opening up and sharing with my peers the struggles that I was going through. And then I realized how many people connected with, the journey and the challenges that I was facing and the repression, and just was liberating other people as I opened up and gave permission to people to open up as well. And I really saw how many men were struggling with these identities that are created around what it means to be a man. And so I started to gain some inspiration of impacting the lives of others. Regardless of being in the narcotics, I always loved my peers, right? Like it's kind of a bit of the modern day Pablo Escobar, where I'd be making shit tons of money and then hosting boat cruises, parties, paying for everything, like
mm,
trying to invest in more philanthropic things, like all the while like ball and chain with this guilt and shame, which I realized was an addictional emotional state. I think from a lot of that behavioral punishment, I think we get addicted to emotions. So if you're if you're shamed and guilted as a child, often like that becomes a standard to internally operate, and your operating systems like actually goes out and looks for it and seeks it. So
mm,
I had to go into the fucking line of work that gave me all of that, right? To work through it. And where am I going with this thought thread? So yeah, I started to do some more healing work and I was still in this debauchery life, and same time during the week be like this super health guy, and then weekends debauchery.
mm,
And then there's just many steps that saved my life, right? Like at the peak of my debauchery, I went to see, at one point the psychiatry ran its course. I felt she passed some judgment on me being in the cocaine business, where I was trying to make an analogy of like, how is it that doctors and pharmacists can prescribe all this Oxycontin, hillbilly heroin to people who think that they don't even know what they're getting into.
right.
And, I'm making this comparison and she made a comment around like essentially judging like selling cocaine and what she prescribing Oxycontin is more righteous, which to
Right.
me is still, I think there's more honesty in fucking knowing what you're getting into than somebody going for a prescription drug and not having any idea of the impacts of these side effects. Like, what the
Wow.
fuck's the difference, right? If you're a drug dealer or a pharmacist, like you're prescribing somebody for their pain.
Totally.
Um, so anyhow, I went to see more of a spiritual advisor of sorts who guided me to try out Vipassana meditation, and
Mm.
that was one gift that was a game changer for me. So I went and sat in silence for 10 days,
Wow.
uh, and keep in mind, from the age of like 14 to 34, there wasn't a single night of the week where I stayed home. I was out every single night. I averted being with my feelings like the plague. So 10 days in silence, I really, whew, man, it was a challenge. First 7 days, I couldn't separate from the mind of like
Totally.
judgment of like blame projecting this person did that, this fucker did this to you, that person screwed you over, how'd you let this happen? I couldn't separate from it. It was just so
Yeah.
potent. Finally, by the seventh day, I had a breakthrough with that mind that chatter just had deceased, and I could see like a bird over there. I could see a piece of trash that shouldn't have been there in the forest, and it's like a bee fluttering. It was like I was present, and I was like, wow,
Wow.
this is what it's like to be outside of this neurotic mind that's never stopping to put yourself down or judge or blame, and it was a little glimpse into what was possible. So, I didn't solve all my problems, went back to the debauchery, but it was shifting. The ball was rolling, the momentum had shifted. And slowly over time, I went from 200 drinks a week to 100 drinks to 50 to 20. And there were some other really pivotal moments that really steered me in the direction that I needed to go. A friend challenging me that I couldn't quit drinking, and I did for 6 months. And, there's a lot more to that story, and essentially a lot of a lot of cattle prods and a lot of sledgehammers to the ego that I had to go through to die many times over again and be reborn. And I think the biggest one of the I always say the greatest achievements in my life was leaving the narcotics business, the drug business. I had wanted out for some time, and it was actually the origins of Bold and Centered came from a woman who was a singer who had this vision of a movement, a social justice movement to inspire awakening, to inspire change through mediums of art. And then along with that social justice movement, there'd be a Bold and Centered record label where we'd promote musicians who have a strong message for humanity.
Wow.
And that's a whole other story in itself. She was coming at me to be an investor. I'm like, why are you coming to me? Like, I don't know anything about this line of work. Like, what are you doing? But she knew that I had some connections with some big players in the business, some of the biggest guys who launched OVO. And she was persistent. And then finally, I gave her a shot. I'm like, okay, put on a show and like, let's see what you got. And that's another long story, but I lost a homegirl way too young. She died of an overdose. We were part-time lovers, and it just rocked my world. The day after her funeral, she puts on this showcase, and every song just like spoke to my soul. It was like hope, faith, forgiveness, and she was one of the most talented singers. So on the spot, I invested in her and ended up pouring a lot of money and a lot of time trying to be the hero and saving somebody else, all the while averting my own inner work. And but it gave me a sense of purpose, right? We started to do some philanthropic work. At some point, she left the movement. She was the face, my partner. I mixed business with pleasure. I moved her into my house, and I got popped. I got arrested. My door got kicked in. Somebody who had been working for me, ratted me out, and I was facing 4 years behind bars. So she left the movement, and I was left to decide, can I carry this forward on my own? This is 10 years back. So I'm at the bottom of the barrel here. I just got arrested. I lost all the money I had. I'm in deep debt and not much that's working for me. I could have easily taken these life blows and just said, hey, you know what? I gotta just stop it all and face the harsh reality that there's a good chance I'm going to do 4 years in jail. Or start from scratch, say thank you, goodbye, and start to build a team myself and carry forth this mission that became my real only source of inspiration for living. And I did that. I put together a team quickly, and that's when we really started to make some impact. I started to work in marginalized communities in the west end of Toronto, and we We did a free barbecue drop in where we had live performers and artists. And yeah, the impact was so beautiful. And that day, Toronto police came onto the scene. I'm so used to averting them. I'm like, oh shit, we got to hightail it out of here. We got no permits. We just did things cowboy style. And they loved what we did. And sure enough, they sponsored us to put on a basketball program every week for underserved communities. And then there's a program called Reset that was a part of Toronto Community Housing that had gotten all this funding for improvements, and they heard about us, so they came out and then they wanted to work with us. So we did an after school club, we did a summertime activities club, and did a lot of wonderful, meaningful impact. And all the while still having a foot in the underworld and facing 4 years behind bars. And so things are snowballing, and there's a real opportunity for scalability now. Boldandcentered is getting recognized. The next barbecue, we blew the roof off. We had a 10-piece reggae band. We had Emmanuel Jal, who's a pretty profound speaker who opens for people like Richard Branson. Um, I had the local MPs coming out and shaking hands with me and taking photos. Pro Action Police was sponsoring my businesses, all the while I'm facing 4 years behind bars.
Wow.
And so I'm getting to the conclusion of this. So, my heart had wanted out for some time, but I struggled mightily with the belief in myself to be able to do anything. Like I had thought all I knew was the narcotics business at the time. I got into it at 14 and I couldn't imagine leaving it, being in debt and how I'd be able to pay for myself. But finally, as I developed more and more confidence and self-love, a month before my trial, probably the first time that I prayed in my life, I dropped down and I said to the big guy, I'm like, if you're out there, like, I'm done. Like my heart can't do this anymore, and I'm finished. And if and I said I surrendered. I said if my time is better served in jail for humanity's sake, then I accept that. And if it's not, like hook a brother up, amen. And sure enough, just before trial, I got off on a technicality. The police had a faulty warrant and how they obtained a warrant, and I was able to leave that. So I left the line of work. I gave my phone. I had a driver. I'm like, I don't want to see any money. I don't want anything to do with this. Like, I'm done. And what better thing to get an etch a sketch than to start your new life anew and sell your house and go to the jungle. So that's what I did. I sold the house and I left to the Amazon for 4 months. It's where my name stems from. Rawa, Ranin Rawa is the long form version of it. And I went to the Amazon for 3 months in deeper search of meaning, right? Like I had been 20 years just disconnected. And I had two intentions going out there. One was a disconnect to reconnect. I had this vision of going into the Amazon, sitting around a fire with some shamans with face paint on and just no technology. I just wanted to be away from the noise so I could just find myself, all this fucking noise I had in my head for so long. And I didn't go down there to work with plant medicine, but I stayed open to it. And my second intention was to reestablish my relationship to Christ. I'd thrown the baby in the bathwater out with I had a lot of, I don't know the origins of where it stems from. I had a lot of disdain for institutional religions and seeing the picture of people on a cross coming into indigenous tribes and cultures as missionaries to interrupt their lifestyle and some of the shadow sides of the missionaries and the impacts on residential schools and all that stuff just really boiled my blood. And I threw out anything to do with religion. But as I started to heal, I recognized that the energy of Christ and Master Yeshua, Jesus, that frequency had nothing to do with institutional religion. And I set the intention to reestablish myself to Christ. So fast forward, I'm in the Amazon. I had this intention of landing and going into the deep jungle right away. But sure enough, Creator had me be of service. I just sold my house. The family that I was living with was building a house, and I took it upon myself to build them an extension onto their home. So when I'm there, I land and I'm in prayer, I'm meditating at night, and I didn't know how to go about connecting to Christ. I think Christ is an energy, this frequency that lives in all of us. It's a frequency code. And then there's Master Yeshua, who's an ascended master. So I don't, they're not one and the same to me.
Mm,
Christ was an energy that many ascended masters have carried forth. And so anyhow, I'm trying to establish my relationship to Christ and to Jesus in particular. So at the end of my prayers, I'd be like, yo, Yeshua, like, you there? Like, I'm here. Like, I don't know how to go about doing this, but I want to establish a relationship. And even that is planting energetic seeds, right? So, um, fast forward, I'm in the Amazon. I find ayahuasca. Ayahuasca finds me. I sit and I go through some of the most challenging ceremonies you could imagine. It was kicking my ass. It was all about getting me out of my head and into my heart. And the medicine was whipping me all around the jungle. So long story short, through trial and error, I ended up sitting with a 92-year-old shaman who works with what's called the Nuyarao and is known as the Tree of Life. And his apprentice happened to be there, and he explained to me that the Tree of Life is a direct connection to Christ consciousness, and it's only transmitted through very few select people. And I had the honor of actually drinking. So the shaman has the spirit infused in him, and he can infuse that in you through his prayers and through intention. But I actually had the honor too. They had some of the liquids from the Tree of Life, and I had drank some of that. So it was just wild. I had these intentions and I had no plans. And sure enough, spirit just guided me to the deep jungle, sitting with a 92-year-old shaman who works with the Tree of Life, the connection to Christ consciousness. And I worked through 20 plus maddening ceremonies where it's just kicking my ass, getting me out of my head to finally to the point where by the end of it all, I was sitting on the river shore bank and all of these voices, the maddening voices had stopped and I was able to just be fully present and enjoy like the dolphins swimming and the birds flying overhead and just starting to find some of that inner balance and peace. So, and that's where I was gifted the name Rawa. It was from the family whose home that I helped build. And my shaman translated it to mean beautiful skin of the earth, rolling thunder and lightning.
mm,
So that's the version that resonated the most with me. And so that's the story there of, you know, the the past and how and then the transition point of going into more of the light per se.
mm,
And I really was inspired to get back to the roots of civilization, right? Like the existence that I was living was pretty empty and meaningless, right? Consumerism, Western culture, substance use, and there was no connection to spirit. There was no connection to like a deeper meaning. And then that took me the following year to the Andes, where I spent 5 months in the Andes, and I was working with the Queros tribe, who are known as the high priests of the Incan empires, as they lived so high in altitude that when the Spanish came, they were left alone and went and visited them. I started to get more into stewardship of the earth, where I was working on a permaculture project and learning grow bio-intensive skills. And I happened to have a group called the Kogi Mamos of Colombia come through, and I sat in ceremony with the Kogi Mamos in the Queros Pacos. And I really started to witness what it meant to walk and live in reciprocity, right? A lot of these indigenous tribes, they're prophesized if we don't start making offerings and honoring back to the earth, to the waters, that, we're coming to the end of our time as a species. And witnessing these traditional tribes was game changing for me. And so there's this whole shifts that were happening internally, getting back to the earth and all the while yeah, doing a whole etch a sketch, internally of my own life, this whole rebirthing process. And this snowballed the following year into going to Kenya. I spent 8 months in Kenya. I had one intention, which was to go there to reclaim my heart as my own, as if it had been fractured by someone had stolen it or something, back to the motherland. And that was that's a whole podcast in itself. Like crazy 8 month journey. I get quarantined, guided by this tattoo on my arm. I get to Kenya and people are like, oh, it's from a tribe called the Turkana tribes. I'm like, okay, well, that's clearly where I'm meant to go. So I get to Kenya, I land, and I spent 3 months revitalizing a permaculture project farm, going back to organic, and I was delivering sermons on the need to get off the chemicals. And then I take a bus to visit this tribe. As to me, that's like, okay, that's where Spirit's telling you to go. So I land there, and the day after I land, the world shuts down as we know it because of this virus known as what I call COVIDita or COVIDa. And I'm happily quarantined back to the origins of civilization, which is known as the Turkana region, as they found the oldest skeletons in the world there, living in huts made of cow dung. So I'm back to where it all began as the world's collapsing as we know it. So that was quite fitting. I'm like, what am I meant to take in here? What am I being shown? And a lot of the things that I really reflected upon was just like how much more present and seemed like a level of joy that people who the Western culture would come and look down upon or like be judgmental. Oh, these poor people, like they come from nothing. They have huts and they live in a little clan with their generational families and they have bare means, but they're just joyful, they're present, and they're connected. And so I really got to see that less is more.
Hmm.
So through all this, I had slowly started to develop some land in Gravenhurst that I'm currently at right now. And I wasn't sure if I was going to come back. I was really questioning, like, okay, is this the collapse that I had been waiting for? Like, is this the systems down? Like, I didn't know, right? So I'm bracing myself. Okay, can I survive here? Well, there's a lake. I can eat fish, and these tribes have lived off of meat and blood for years. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do this. So I didn't know what the level of collapse we were looking at, and sure enough, things weren't quite as, I mean, they're pretty severe at the time. COVID, a lot of things shut down. But after 3 months, I got the message to go back home. And it was such a gift that time for me as it cleared a lot of the distractions and noises out of my space. And I just started to go full throttle onto developing this community that I'm living here in Gravenhurst into an off-grid harmony center. So I'm recognizing there's just these thoughts of like, wow, you're talking a lot here, but I guess this was the ask was for me to go into my story. So
Absolutely, bro. No, this
so
this is amazing.
so I'll go into it a bit further. So I land back and now rewind a few years. I'd done my first men's initiation ceremony with an organization called the Mankind Project. I'd gotten into men's work when I first launched Boldandcentered and when I first started seeing psychiatry. I went to monthly dinners, which was my first foray into conscious relating with men with an organization called the Universal Brotherhood. When I was in Kenya, I started probably the first ever Kenyan men's group, and I was just getting more and more inspired to start to support men find their voices, awaken their hearts, and just like break down these shells of what it meant to be masculine and be able to hold each other with love, with tenderness, with strength, with hold each other accountable to living to the lives we want to live. So I landed back here and I held my first 2 weekends for my inner tribe, two men's weekends that were just like epic, had DJ dance parties, like so heart opening and beyond the realms of what, so much love being shared and breaking down the stigmas of what it meant to be a man. And from there, it just started to snowball. The next year, I had a closed men's group where we gather once a month for a weekend over the winter months and just have these deeply transformative weekends. And the next year we did that again, except we kept it going for the entire year, where we'd meet once a season and once a month over the winter. And then Spirit guided me to really open it up to the public. And I started to host and share um, men's gathering to the public at large and seeing these transformations that men were going through. Um, it continued to inspire me to step further and further in. And I asked the question, okay, like it's great that these men can come through here, have these deeply transformative weekends. But the reality is they're often left to their old devices when they go back to their former neural pathways, go back to the same job, same family, who's going to witness them as that person. So lasting change is challenging to make without strong community support and accountability. That's to me is the key ingredient to men's work is accountability systems, right? So I started to think, what am I really building here? And I thought about like a frequency of names, like how to build more support, right? Like let's create a network where men who have skills that maybe I don't have, but I still want to see these brothers get that support. I can create this kind of a ecosystem where men can share and gather, hence where the movement launched out of. So I'd shelved Bolden Centered 8 years prior when I went to the jungle and needed to just do my own personal healing work. And I started to think about the frequency of the movement. Like, okay, is it power and grace? Is it the rewilded man? But the frequency of bold and centered still resonated the most truthful to me, inspire men to stand bold in their beliefs, but stay centered in their heart, keep in mind we're all united as one. And so I relaunched it as a men's empowerment movement, which was a call to action to unify the brotherhood movement and just provide this ecosystem of opportunities for men to rise. So that was just over a year ago that I enrolled a few core brothers into this vision, this idea, and they were in. And we started to meet once a week, bi-weekly, and start to create the pieces of the puzzle, which was quite messy doing. Like I can be a visionary. I don't have the background skills and like necessarily structure and organization have been my Achilles heel. And it's been a training ground for me and my growth and my leadership. And we announced the Summit of Masculinity. It was just over a year ago in Toronto at Alternity, where we brought together a lot of the leaders. You were there for that, yeah?
No, I missed that one.
Oh, you weren't there. Okay. Yeah, we brought a lot of the leaders in the field of men's work, and I got the message that it was time to host a festival celebrating masculinity. And so I'm just gonna get into the light a bit. Just adjust myself here. My house is blocking the light. So I got the awareness that, Bolden Center was gonna put on a festival celebrating masculinity. And I got on my mission of connecting with the leaders. And through that mission, I started to go to different circles, different places, and I met a gentleman who connected me with a brother named Adam Lewis.
Hmm,
And sure enough, I got on a call. I'm like, "Oh, it's you!" Like I had met him already through mutual acquaintances, and I shared with him my vision, and I have this vision for a festival. He's like, "Oh, I got a vision for a festival too," and I also happen to have a 100-acre farm. I was like, "Okay." Here we go. So I immediately went out to see him. As soon as I walked in, I see a staff that's a flute. That's the same one that my elder carries. I'm just like, okay, me and this man are destined to create something grander than I can ever imagine. And there's a few deal breakers for me. It's like come clean spirited, no substances, rooted in prayer, drumming, sacred fires, and everything was just like this synergy, was just so harmonious with him. So we put this vision together. Boldandcentered got on it in its action mode. Like last year was the year of the warrior, and we went to like 5 festivals. And to me, the Sacred Fires and is something that's very, I think, instrumental in keeping the our prayers strong and putting out to the cosmos that we're still here as Earth stewards, right? You light a fire, you open a channel, you open a portal to connect heaven on earth. It's a way that indigenous would connect to the spirit guides. It was through the element of fire. So I went around to 5 festivals. This is all like the lead up to Man Camp, hosting sacred fires, enrolling brothers into the brotherhood movement. We started to host a weekly fireside sit down online where we'd have different leaders come out and lead talks and just walking our talk, right? Unifying the brotherhood movement. And then Man Camp happened. And it was like we had no rhyme or reason pulling this off, really.
hmm,
Neither of us had put on festivals, but I had set the intention for 150 people. And then the week prior, we were at 60. And then sure enough, just like spirit working, like the day of 150, like on the dot.
hmm,
And the festival itself was just like more than I could imagine. Prayers were answered, elders came through, brought the teepee down, drum circles, men just having the most glorious breakthroughs, going through their challenges, being held in community, held in brotherhood. And brothers left there just like spine erect and just feeling the potency of what it meant to return to the bonds of sacred brotherhood. And it was such a powerful activation and so inspiring. So, since then it's just been continued momentum. And last year was the year of the warrior, and then this year it's like stepping into kingship. So
hmm,
we had done all this service, right? Like nothing for any compensation, right? It was all from the heart, and great. Reality is I'm not a billionaire or a millionaire, and there's no sustainability in that. And so I started to put together a framework for this ecosystem of opportunities where we've built out an online platform, an online community where we have programs that are accessible for men who really want to break through the limitations from the limiting stories and reclaim the parts of ourselves that may have been fractured off in trauma. So we have the 10-week Warriors Heart program that's actually launching tonight.
hmm.
Tonight's the intake call. If anybody gets this in time, next week is the real launch. So we still got room for a few more. And yeah, we're doing a business alchemy program and yeah, getting really the back end systems dialed in, which, I recognize from my life, I've been in my immature masculine, a lack of structure, a lack of discipline, a lack of systems to support this initiative. So that's been the work this winter, all the while still in service. I held a Costa Rican rite of passage and things like the Vision Quest are super important to me, right? So we just finished our men's Vision Quest. We had a youth rite of passage, which was a youth Vision Quest, and bringing back, from my walk of life, ancestral wisdom, simple things like the element of fire, of prayer, walking in reciprocity. I just got gifted through my elder the blessing to hold sweat lodge ceremonies, and so this is really the inspiration behind the movement, and it's been forcing me out of my shadows into my playing small and looking at the limiting stories that I've created and really, to me, the change happens as you step into action and you step into your purpose and you're held in and forged to be the man that you are by stepping into the fire, having men that are willing to reflect to you, like where you're playing small, holding you accountable to growth. So this is our stand. It's to create a world of initiated men. It's to create a world of accessibility to men's circles. We're providing trainings and facilitated trainings on how to hold men's circles and how to really hold a group energy for men to be authentically expressed, for all of them parts to be witnessed, to be held, to be seen. Some tools for men to go into their shadows and to be able to transmute that into the light and to repattern and reprogram the limiting stories. So it's just the beginning. And this is my devotion is just that. It's to awaken hearts and men to unify with our warrior sisters as one again, back in the body of Christ. So, with that, we got some big gatherings in the pipeline as well. So anyhow, now I really feel like I'm talking so much. So I'm gonna put a
Wow.
pause there and I'm
Yes.
actually gonna transition inside because my battery's a little low here.
Okay.
So I'm here though. You can keep talking.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. Yeah. Absolutely incredible.
My
I'm so grateful to just to be able to hold that space and allow for the resonance of who you are and what you've been sharing to potentially just to connect community really, is I've been building a community here, and um it's all in the spirit of unity. And yeah, I mean, I've been to main camp last year. Rawa was just mentioning this gathering of brothers, and there's something profound that happens when men gather, and we support each other, and we like I was moving through something at main camp, and uh that was it was an interesting time because usually, I'm pretty feeling pretty like joyful and uplifted, and something happened in my life that I didn't understand. I didn't get why it was happening. It didn't make sense to me. And yeah, the way that I was held at main camp it was amazing. And I'm coming again, no matter, I don't care. I would literally fly across the earth to be
Hmm.
in that field. And yeah, so if anybody here is wants to know more, I'll obviously put Rawa's information, and I mean, there's so much to go into, and we are going to continue this podcast. I would literally say like that is what you shared is enough, but I think we're going to stretch it out a bit. Um, my question for you then, like so many questions arose, but the one that's sticking to come up here is how do you start with a man that is in that space of not knowing who he is, and uh just kind of spiritually disconnected, kind of just feels like no purpose. How would you, or how do you approach a situation like that? Like where do you start? And then what kind of steps, like what do you feel is the most important aspect to begin to um like assist and help to awaken a brother back into the heart. So if somebody comes to you and is like, Rawa, I need help, like how do you how do you go about it?
Yeah, great question. And thanks for the reflection and grateful to hear the impacts that Man Camp held on you too. That's beautiful, beautiful reflection, brother. Um, so how do you go about supporting where a man's just getting started off? I mean, depending on where they're at, first things first, if somebody's coming to me, that shows a certain level of awareness that whatever's they're doing isn't working. And they've had enough humility to come and ask. That is massive. It took me a long time before I had that first ego death, which is like, okay, breaking down that body armor of I need to do it all alone was, whew, that was a fucking challenge for me. There's so many spirits and voices trying to keep me in isolation, right? I think separation, keeping me to themselves. So once that initial cracking of the body armor happens, that allows space for the heart to soften and to be able to receive the support needed, right? So, once somebody's committed saying, "Hey, I need some support, I want to come out," that's a whole different ballgame, right? And to me, I used to think it was me, like, I used to think that I had to give all these men these transformations and yeah, I used to put so much pressure on myself to have these blast off experiences and do everything, tend to the fires, make the meals, and just make sure that everyone's having these incredible journeys, right? This pressure and that was a lot of ego involved, right? It was like thinking that it was me. And
Mm,
the more I've softened into this work, it's the real simple. It's you just open sacred space and you create agreements for men to be fully expressed and fully themselves, and you lead. There's obviously a responsibility for somebody who's in the facilitator position, which is to lead with courage and to lead with vulnerability. There might be different prompts of questions of like, what's one thing you don't want any of these men to know in front of you? And
mm,
that's a powerful one where it's like so many men conditioned to be stoic and you never show quote unquote weakness, right? And so to me, I work with spirit, I work with the elements, right? So the lands that I steward, we come into the teepee for a sacred fire and for our opening ceremony, we have agreements and we do our check-ins and then just creating a space of safety is and calling in the support from guides and opening sacred space, the magic unfolds within that. There's tools in the toolboxes which are helpful, having some somatic exercises, some breath work. We got a sauna to detox as a sweat lodge. I'm very much rooted in having a holistic life where physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, right? Too much talking. Men don't move energy through talking, right? Like it's
mm,
it's good to get men talking, but you're not going to get to the root of any core things just through talking. So you got to know how to shake it out of the body, roar it out, scream it out, move it out. So depending on the weekend and the flavor and the season, there's different seasons for everything, right? So since moving up north, I've gotten more aligned with the seasons and how to energetically align with them, right? Summertime is that like super yang masculine energy. That's in the medicine wheel. That's the time of the masculine, right? Winter's the time of the feminine. So it might be a whole different experience coming out here in summer where maybe you're getting more physicality and more strength around power of your language, setting healthy boundaries, team building, and developing tools around physical prowess. Wintertime may come out and that's the feminine time. That's the time to nurture. That's the time to go inwards into the cave. What shadows are holding you back? Shadow work is it's a powerful part of men's work to get to know your shadows and the unconscious patterns and the voices that are sabotaging your life, right? And so many men, I mean, I've lived it, right? It's like shadows ran me for years, right? The self-sabotage, fear of abandonment, I'm not worthy piece, all of these beliefs are the foundation of all of our actions. It's
mm,
crazy it's that simple. It's like if I'm not worthy, then I'm not embracing love. I can't go deep into a partnership. I can't, live a fulfilled life. And when you go into those shadows and you start to unpack them and you start to process them, I don't mean they just go away. You just get conscious to them, and then you can have a bit of separation where you can be, oh, okay, that's my abandonment piece there, and that's why I'm showing up trying to control my partner. And oh, okay, I see you. I'm going to speak to that. Thank you. I know you're trying to protect me, but I love you, and I got this now. I'm going to claim myself as the central authority of this being.
Right.
I am the I am statement. I am the creator here. And
Yes.
just those parts need our love, though, right? They need to integrate back into our being. Like I used to go to war with them,
Mm,
beat them down, try to resist, fight them. But love is the answer. So,
mm,
winter time, it might be a different season, right? It might be more of a shadow work time and going into the unprocessed. And so the seasonalities for everything. And right now we're coming into peak masculine, and it's been quite a joy understanding the medicine wheel and how it works when I came and submerged myself in nature and seeing how my energies align with the seasons. And yeah, it's about to hit peak Leo, I'm a Leo, so it's go time. And
mm.
so, I think the first step is cracking that initial body armor. It's like, I need help in receiving it. And, you can only get, what's the saying? Guide a horse to water, you can't make him drink it, right? So if a man is still in his lone wolf mentality, and well, I see a lot of men burn with shame and guilt of like, yeah, I gotta harbor all this to myself because, you know, the world's out there scary for me to express it, or, it's too shameful to express it. I'm just gonna deal with this all internally. It's, so much conditioning men have gone through to shame their feelings, right? To shame feeling sad, shame feeling grief, and it gets suppressed and suppressed, and that's where I don't know the word toxic because it's just words that are thrown into the mixer that I would say the unintegrated masculine energies coming out controlling. And you know when you can't process feelings or you don't have the tools to, you try to control your environments. And so I'm drifting off on different tangents here, but
No, no, a few important things came up that I want to address here for all, like not only men, but for all of us, and for women included, but like we'll stay focused on the men, but so there's three things came up, and one of them is anger. What, like, because anger is something that I feel the most out of these, what, like guilt, shame, but anger, like I notice in myself still there's a lingering anger. And so I want to talk about how we heal anger. And
Mhm.
then I think that's important to address first. And then, like, what are some tools that we can not suppress or repress, like it's like anger, it's something animalistic, and it's something natural that it, if we don't express it, or if, and not expression in like a negative or a violent way, like taking it out on someone, but how do we heal it within ourselves so we don't have to project it onto the screen, or that we act in ways, because I have brothers that have recently acted out the anger that is within, and it's so destructive. And so how do we, like, it's extremely important prior to any of the I amness and any of the Christ consciousness, is like, even I feel as well that I am, but even living in this elevated state of consciousness, I am not totally free of these feelings. So in your experience of taking men through, and then also any woman that are listening can relate, which is why I brought it up, because I know that we all deal with it, especially in this world where there's so many things that can can spark that anger. So in your experience, how do we heal? And it's something that I too want to take home a tool from this podcast. So
Hmm.
how do we go about it in the most loving, kind, and highest state of consciousness, but actually heal and integrate our anger?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, brother. And if I'm going to speak with humility, that's probably, not probably, that's an area I've been integrating for some time,
Mm,
feeling like I don't even know where my anger is. Often for me, it would go into shame and guilt or grief.
mm,
And anger, it's been something that I've been harmonizing as I give myself the permission to express it. Although the default pattern is to more shame and guilt, and anger is actually a higher vibration than shame and guilt are. Those are the lowest on the charts of vibrational frequency of emotions. So it's a life force energy anger that can be potent. It can be a fire that's set to like say no more. Like I'm done with the situation. That actually came up recently where I was working with a brother who just couldn't make commitments to like certain areas, and I kept on trying to be like accommodating and pleasing, and at the expense of the movement, the expense of my own well-being, where I just had to come out with like this is done. Like
mm,
so, the anger when targeted in a conscious way can be that Kali energy that's like enough,
mm,
like the boundary setter. Now, if we're not being responsible for how that is expressed, you're asking how to really be acquainted with that frequency and allow it to have its space. I think first things first is as a man, it's like for myself, it's constantly acknowledging what I'm feeling.
mm,
So when anger goes suppressed and it gets suppressed and it's shamed and guilted, you can't express it. That's when it can come out in violent ways and come out in ways that are just destructive, that aren't healthy destruction. Some destruction is needed. Destruction needs to die for new things to be born sometimes. But when it's just an unconscious pattern, it's usually because you're not giving it its proper respect and its voice.
mm.
So the first thing to acknowledge is when it's coming, it's just like, I feel angry. Like I am currently angry right now. And I need to actually be, if it's really acute and you need to like remove yourself from a situation, it's to express that and honor your needs. I need to go and be with myself because right now I'm not able to really think straight or act accordingly. And I need
Right.
to go move it. And then that's where, we get into sometimes the wild man exercises where a lot of men, it's so dormant that they can't even bring up anger,
Mm,
where they'll be encouraged to go into the wilderness and can put on some primal Viking music and just let out some primal screams, get a baseball bat and take it out on a pad or, get into like just wailing on a boxing bag and feeling and thinking about things in your space that you're holding on to that need to move.
yeah.
So usually underneath anger is sadness,
Mm,
right? So often at times people who are walking around so angry at life is because there's been such an aversion of feeling sad or
mm,
being able to grieve, right? So grieving is a superpower. To me, grieving is the greatest reverence you give life when you grieve a loss, when you grieve, the pain that you went through. It's a liberating experience. So when you don't have that tool, it can sometimes just lead to being angry, right? So you see people who are emotionally constipated, angry all the time. It's like they don't have the tools to grieve or to feel sadness. So anger is a powerful, powerful tool
mm,
when it's harnessed and utilized in the right way. So simple techniques is like giving it its what am I trying to say here? Giving it honoring what's coming up, right? So it's like I feel angry and I'm gonna allow myself to express that. Like I'm feeling hurt. What happened wasn't right, and I need to go and be responsible for this, so you can communicate that. I am statements, using I statements are powerful. It's not blaming someone. You did this, you did that. How could you do that? You're a piece of shit. So I feel hurt when you did this. I feel upset. I feel betrayed. I feel whatever it may be if that anger is coming up. Now, if it's something that's acute and you're just always angry, just somebody who's walking around angry all the time. That's somebody who really needs to step into doing the work and start to unpack some of the repressed traumas that are being stored in the energy field and giving it its rightful place, right? So coming to a men's circle, sitting in council with men in the sacred fire, asking spirit to support bringing it up and out, doing some process work, getting into some breath, some somatic exercises, you know. So responsibility for anger is a powerful one. So many men have been conditioned to repress it, right? That was my upbringing. Like I had no expressions of any healthy anger. My upbringings were either just my father was just annoyed and my mother was always happy-go-lucky.
Mm,
I didn't know anger was just like not allowed in the space,
right.
right? So it's destructive when you don't allow it in the space and you don't have a healthy relationship with it and give it its rightful place, right? So this is all part of the human experience. There's a lot of bypassing in the spiritual world of like, oh, I
Mm,
want to go live in the upper realms and the higher consciousness, but
right.
forgetting that we're human and we're here to feel it all, right? And to honor it all is the most important thing. So like welcoming that into the space and being able to express it, to move it, to figure out what's buried under there, which once that's moved and the grief can be processed, that's when you can bring in forgiveness, you can bring in compassion, understanding, and see how it's actually served you, right? Like usually there's something that happens for us and not to us, but we're staying in anger. It can be resentful. You want to blame society, blame somebody for something that happened to you. You're not doing the work to process it if you're just staying in that angry vibration, right? So first things first is like give consent, seek consent for it internally, give permission to feel it and process it. And, that's why we do brotherhood stuff, right? It's powerful to be witnessed in that sometimes, to be held. Like I need some counsel, guys, and I need to move through something. And, there's all sorts of different activities that we do around it where it's just, you know, being able to free ourselves from that. So, yeah, it's a powerful emotion, man, that needs to be honored.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you so much for talking about that and for sharing your experience with anger. Um, Many things came up, and yeah, I think the next place to go is I want to share a little bit about how I actually relate to you with your story because we've that's the most I've heard about your story, and your story is it's my story as well, which is
Mhm.
the similarities between us is it's very very close. And I actually know exactly what you're talking about because I don't share this much on the Moonas channel because the Moonas Magica frequency is my higher self, which I've been tapping into. That Moonas Magica is my higher self. And it's a very like higher chakra activity. Like a lot of what I'm teaching and guiding is like channeling energy through the crown and working with these I am statements and Christ consciousness and ascended masters teachings. And that's what I have been teaching on this channel because I genuinely feel that self-inquiry is it's the way to realizing that we are already free, we are already whole, we are already complete. And wow, so much is coming up here because I feel you as well on there's a spiritual ego that naturally gets developed and activated when we have that initial like awakening in this life where it's like, wow, like I am not just my mind and my body. I am I am transcendent. I am right, but there's a difference between an integrated man and a man that is theoretically uh reciting the scriptures, and uh but actually isn't embodying it. And that's where that like when the anger comes up, like it's the way that we respond and we love it. Like Ram Dass says, like, he was inviting these these emotions in for tea, and there's almost this like, oh yeah, like welcome, come in, just like
Yeah,
I'm gonna hold space for you. uh
yeah.
but anyways, to say all this is just these are thoughts that were arising as you were speaking. And I if I shared with my brothers and sisters here on the Moonas channel, but I come from a place of deep addiction, and Rawa's story in the relation is I as well was a dealer, not on large levels, but I was channeling that energy into our earth, and it was destructive, and I was stealing, I was lying, I was cheating, I was in jail, I was in hospitals dozens of times. Like the scar on my head, I was blacked out, and I got hit by a TTC bus, and I woke up in the hospital the next day, and I had broken ribs and my collarbone. Like, the reason why I play with my shoulder like this is because it's messed up. Because I like these are some of the damages that I did, or that happened to me when I was out there, in this debauchery. And ultimately, it's part of the journey, but it's wild that, like, right after that, and I surrendered as well, and I asked God for help, and I went into the rooms of AA to get that first feeling of community and of service, and people that were there to support me and hold me. And I was a younger fellow when I first went into AA. I was 21, and my path has, it's gone away from that into the way that I found where I am, like, I guess, best of service, which has led to the tensor rings and the tools. But ultimately, that isn't as important, which I always share with the community. What's most important is tapping into this fountain of youth, this divine love that we actually all really are. And that's why I am here to teach. This is the message that I want to share, because as we teach with each other, we're learning, and we're actually realizing that, we are one. We are one consciousness, and that is as well as why I am here. And honestly, I feel that, like, I'm now looking for ways that, and personally, I've reached out to Rawa, not on this podcast, but him and I are close brothers away from this, and I've expressed a willingness to, like, I want to step more into like teaching, and that I've been putting these videos out on YouTube. But to me, it's not all about this. This is outside of us, and yes, it creates a pillar of light, which is what we are, but we are that pillar. And these tools have an important aspect in birthing a new earth. Truly, it does. But I am here to share with you, family and community, that yeah, like, love heals all, And I just want to share all that, because it's what drives me. And I actually want to ask you, because this question came up, like, what makes you feel the most fulfilled? Because for me, it's like that constant um feeling like I'm actually being of service. And when people reach out to me and are like, Steven or Muna, like, you actually, like, your presence is changing my life in a
Mm,
positive way. That's what actually makes me feel like this is why I'm here. I genuinely feel that there is no point of being here unless I am making this true impact in a positive way on my brother and my sister's lives. And
mm,
that is why I am here. That is what lights
mm.
me up. That is what keeps me going. That is what sparks this podcast. That is why I reach out to you and be like, brother, let's go. Like, let's keep going. This drive to serve, and to know that the more that we go, the more that we actually embody this and take action, then like we're actually changing the earth for the better and the universe. So what is it that makes you feel fulfilled, and like why do you do this? Like why are you Rawa?
I mean, this wasn't a chosen path, brother. Not it wasn't the I that was choosing this, right? It was the road less traveled and creator getting me on my destiny. So I can't say that I really choose, which I'm mindful of that statement because I do think that a lot of men's work, if you're not choosing powerfully the life you want to live, you're at the whim and mercy of the being a feather in the wind. But on the zoomed out, grander scale thing, this was, I feel like just walking my destiny.
Mm,
And why I do what I do, yeah, hmm, yeah, it's to liberate all souls from suffering,
mm,
really. And there's a new way forward, and that's through love and through unity. I do this for myself. I do this for the generations to come, the generations before me. I don't believe time is linear. As we heal our forefathers, and it's a lot of sacrifices. We're a walking miracle that we're here on this earth, living through this transitional time in human history. We all come with a role. We've all come with an assignment. We've all come with a mission. And for those who are hearing this calling, it's to awaken. It's to awaken to what is possible, to steward this beautiful earth, that this is heaven on earth, and creating that with every breath, every action, every prayer. It's a necessity for humanity's survival. I feel like collaboration and working together to create new systems of empowerment is necessary for us to continue existing as a species. We're being shown the fragilities of our current systems. And if we're not leading from heart, if we're not truly taking responsibilities for our own life, we're at the whim and mercy of being consumers, we're at the whim and mercy of, systems of that don't have our best interest at heart. So this is about humanity's well-being. This is about, yeah, honoring my own dharma of this lifetime to fulfill on my life's mission, and being a catalyst and a cattle prod to awakening hearts and men. And our sisters have been waiting for us for some time. So it's time to return to the hearts and to remember what it's like to be wholeness within, and to be authentic in our personal power, to speak with conviction, to lead with honor, humility, grace, compassion. It's time that we all remember the power that lies within, right? So, you know, eradicating smallness, and the time on earth needs us to be in our full conviction of who we are.
yeah, I want to ask you before we, come into a close, what is the importance of meditation to your life and in general as being a man of the heart? Like I know for myself, like meditation is becoming necessary daily. Just like just to act in meditation, and I just want to hear your perspective on meditation and whether like sitting practice or what you feel about meditation and staying in that vibrational frequency so we don't revert back to these uh these old ways of separation.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for the question. I feel this necessity to incorporate into your life. To me, that's embracing the feminine
Hmm.
energetics of being receptive, of being nurturing, of slowing down, of listening. And that's been my greatest challenge. As I shared 20 years of my life, there wasn't a single night of the week that I didn't go out. And a version of feelings, right? So to hold space for ourselves, to clear and to like be responsible, to detox the mind, to honor our own container and to receive guidance, right? So to me, meditation comes in many forms. Like I recognize my form isn't necessarily the Buddhist way of sitting for an hour in stillness. I enjoy some yoga nidras. What can you do to just stop the Stop the doing. What's the deepest state of rest you can go into? So I like yoga nidras, just walking and watering my garden and just being fully present with where I'm at. Like life can be a walking meditation in the day-to-day activities. Like, as in the spiritual community, it's like put these blocks aside to do some spiritual work. It's just like, yes, I do the daily morning breath works and I do, things of this nature. But through breath, through conscious breathing and being fully present. And the biggest thing, opportunity for me to grow in is the stopping of the doing. I'm a natural Leo. I'm a generator. I see all my birth charts very yang, very masculine, very little water in my charts. So it's been a journey embracing my emotions and slowing down to hold space, sit in front of the mirror. So the meditation comes in many ways, but if you're a man who's not incorporating, to me, stillness, the cultivation of stillness, of receptivity, of going inwards, I, the impacts will be just constantly needing a soother from someone else to take care of you and telling you that everything's going to be okay, or there's no access to personal power when you're not able to receive guidance. And to me, the simplest way of filling your cup back up is stopping doing. That's all we need to do is to
Mhm.
stop the doing and just rest and rejuvenate and replenish. And it sounds simple. It's been one of my greatest challenges. And I'm strengthening in that area. Every lot of people holding wounds, holding traumas to prevent us from wanting to just be with ourselves, be with our emotions, process. So vital necessity, and hence my stand to live in a world of initiated men, where these initiations is much about going through the fire to be able to sit with yourself and sit with whatever needs to come through, whether it's like you're facing destructive thought forms, you're facing your inner demons, like the vision quest, sitting in silence for 20, 72 hours, no food, no water. You know, I've had to do months in solitude. I did 3 months in a log cabin in the winter where I am right now. No phone, no power, no tech, heated by wood. I had to do that because I was averting it for 20 years. So the earlier you can get on that, the fucking more ahead of the game you are, I had to do a lot of makeup. And yeah, it's everything. It's everything to get to know you, to know thyself.
Mm.
God within, right? To discover God within. A lot of programming in this world of looking for God externally and get down, and so many mediums to tell us, how to connect to source, how to connect to God and creator. And there's some beautiful guides out there, but the most powerful guides are the ones who are supporting you. Remember who you are and remember that we all have our own means of connecting to creator. So yeah, discover it by creating stillness.
Every Wednesday, there's a gathering, correct, on Zoom through Boldandcentered. Is that correct? Every Wednesday night?
Yeah, so Boldandcentered, we have a community platform where currently we're on WhatsApp and we're building out a larger community that's about to be launched on Go High Level. And we do a fireside sit down where we have different leaders in the men's movement, facilitators come and lead men on a talk around different skill sets and how to empower their lives. So that's something that's available. Anybody who wants to get involved, I can share with you the link, Stephen, that you can post it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's an online community and as of right now, a free fireside sit down weekly call. And then there's much more resources for men who really want to go deeper and uncover their gold. And there's deeper personalized programs that are available as well. And we often run initiation ceremonies on the lands that I steward up in Gravenhurst here. So all sorts of opportunities for men who are really ready to say, I want to live to my fullest potential.
Yeah, if any of you are in resonance, please reach out to Brother Rawa. And yeah, I mean it's a whole team, and there's very expansive growth happening very rapidly. So also men camp, if there's any men here that want to come to this festival later in the summer. When is man camp?
Hand camp is September 14th to 18th.
Okay.
15th to 18th, I believe. And that's, yeah, it warms my heart just thinking about it. That's going to be a potent activation. We're scaling up this year, full extra day, sweat
Nice.
lodges, elders, deep prayer. It's going to be an activation. So for any men out there looking to, improve the quality of their lives and remember what it's like to be held in brotherhood, come on out.
Yeah, I'll leave all the info for contacting Rawa, and I'll leave the info for Man Camp in the description. And the last question before we close off is what I know you said it, you said it earlier, but what is the what is your message in like a paragraph to leave us all out and to spark to spark us to move to carry this energy of the podcast into our day.
Appreciate that, brother. Hmm. Ah, comes down to unity, We're not meant to go at this world alone, you know. We all heal together as we come together and support each other for all parts of ourselves to be witnessed, to be present, to be allowed in the space, nobody left behind in the sacred fire. So, the invitation is to return to the bonds of sacred brotherhood. And for those who are sisters too, we have a sisterhood organization called Power and Grace where we do a lot of unity gatherings. So we're not meant to go at it alone, guys. Reach out, get the support, have the humility to ask for help, and you will receive it. Have those prayers strong. We're all in this together. Together we rise, baby. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm deeply honored and deeply grateful to to hold the space here for my brother Rawa. And yeah, I just love this brother, and I'm so grateful that we're connected and we're close, and that the I'm currently in Ontario, but I am moving out west in British Columbia, but we're expanding the grid, and we are putting up the nodes of the pillars of light onto this earth, so we can really go through this holy shift. And one thing I will say is it's not an easy shift, and it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be some trials and tribulations collectively that I feel we're going to be going
Mhm.
through. And anybody that's listening, stay close. You can reach out to brother Rawa, you can reach out to me personally, and I want to be available, and Rawa is making himself available because him and I are both tuned into our heart center, and we know why we are here, and we're staying strong and holding firm in the knowledge of who we are as men on this earth right now. And as I said, why we're here to alchemize and to transmute everything back into love and back into unity and back into service. And like I'm still every day experiencing the attempt of this force that tries to make me small and pull me back down into the illusion. But I've I've been staying strong and affirming who I am. And I just want to end this podcast back again on just, cycling it back to the beginning of how we started, in prayer and in affirmation and in feeling and in claiming our birthright as kings and queens of the earth. And I'm telling you, family, to take back your power, to come back into the center, and to not to not give your power away anymore, and to claim it, and to say with me that I am I am the power, and I am the creator of reality. And that yes, it's an arduous journey to continue to reprogram and to feel the suffering. But at the same time, the suffering is grace. And that's something that Ram Dass really laid down in me, is
Mm.
that suffering is grace. And what we're feeling, that pain, that guilt, that shame, that anger, that fear, that apathy, that grief, like that's all necessary to feel, to live in this higher state of consciousness and to not bypass and to really integrate these human emotions that are just as real and just as valid as living in, a higher divine state of consciousness. Is that this realm has a very large spectrum of souls that are here, and we're each going through our own journey, but we are coming into one, and we are slowly but surely realizing that, what I do to my brother, what I do to my sister, I do to myself. And that the more that we can actually sit in silence and really feel and know that we're being held by this benevolent, loving creator, and that on the other side of this pain, on the other side of this suffering, there is there is a home, there is a feeling of happiness, and there is true oneness, and that is what is real, is unity consciousness. And I hope that this podcast inspires you to, to tap into that and to, as I said, reach out to us. And, there's a bunch of teachings on this podcast, and you can personally get in touch with Rawa. And if you want to come meet us in person, then we'll both be present at Man Camp. And there's a lot of, you can even go see Rawa on the land on these weekend events. So I just want to really let you know that if you're in resonance with us, then we're here for you. So just leaving us in that prayer space, and uh yeah, we can close it off. If there's any last words or any that, like, where we can find you, I will leave it in the description, but however, if you want to share how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, there's a Bold and Centered Instagram page, Bold and Centered Facebook page, as a Bold and Centered website, so we can put that into the description there. That's the simplest way to get in communication. And yeah, closing words, just deep, deep reverence, brother, for the forces that brought us together, for you, for what you bring forth to this world, to anybody taking in this messages. Honor you for seeing the value and investing your time and energy into this. And I'll just close it out with one of my favorite sayings. This reminds me of these times we're moving through. Diamonds are formed under intense pressure and heat.
Hmm.
So we got this, baby. Let's rise.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Much
All
love,
right.
family.
Many
Thank you
blessings.
for tuning in.
Peace, brother.
Peace, peace.